The power of words. Why we should stop using stigmatizing language for addiction. Imagine two people walk into the emergency room for the same problem. One nurse says, "The addict in 4 is here again." And the other nurse says, "The person in room 6 has a substance use disorder." They're talking about the same exact person. Nothing about their condition has changed. The only thing that changed was the language that was used. Now ask yourself this: which one sounded more like a human being? Most of us don't think about the language that we use. We repeat words that we've learned our entire lives, and we don't really consider the message that they send. When it comes to addiction, those words can shape how people are viewed, treated, and even how they see themselves. So today, I'd like to persuade you that changing the way we talk about addiction isn't about being politically correct. It's about reducing stigma, encouraging recovery, and recognizing that a person's diagnosis should never become their identity. First, let's talk about why language matters. Words shape the way we think. When we hear labels like addict, junkie, or drug user, those words often become the first thing we think about the person. Instead of seeing a parent, a student, a coworker, or a neighbor, we begin to see only the addiction. Person-first language changes that. Instead of saying addict, we say a person with a substance use disorder. Instead of alcoholic, we say person with alcohol use disorder. It may seem like a small difference, but it reminds us that addiction is something a person experiences. It is not who they are. Language shapes perception, and perception influences how we respond to others. So why does this matter? Because stigma has real consequences. People with substance use disorders are often facing judgment long before they ever seek treatment. Many are viewed as weak, morally flawed, irresponsible, rather than as individuals living with a treatable medical condition. That stigma can discourage people from seeking treatment because they're afraid of being judged by their family, their employers, the healthcare providers, or even just society. As someone who works in behavioral health, I've seen firsthand that people in recovery are so much more than their diagnosis. They're parents trying to repair their relationship with their children. They're veterans with PTSD. They're students working towards degrees. They're neighbors, siblings, sons, and daughters. Their addiction is part of their story, but it should never become their entire identity. And this conversation becomes even more interesting when we look at recovery itself. Because in a lot of 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, it's very common to introduce yourself by saying, "Hi, I'm Lisa, and I'm an alcoholic or an addict." For many people, these words said for the very first time is incredibly freeing. Addiction thrives in secrecy and denial. So openly acknowledging that problem is often one of the hardest and most important first steps towards recovery. Now, I'm not suggesting that these programs are wrong. They've helped millions of people around the world. And for many people, that introduction is a powerful part of their recovery journey. But I do think it's worth asking a question. If someone has been in recovery for 10 or 20 years, should the first thing they say about themselves still be their addiction? Or should they be seen as a parent, a teacher, a nurse, a veteran, or just simply someone in long-term recovery? Language doesn't shape how other people see us. It shapes how we see ourselves too. While identifying as an addict may help in the beginning, get someone to break through that denial in early recovery, there may come a point where continually leading with that information makes it harder to recognize everything else that person has become. And some people may be thinking, well, they're just words. And I understand that. Most people don't use these terms to be offensive. They're simply using language they've always heard. But words influence attitudes. Think about how much language has changed around mental health over the past decades. Many terms that were once commonly used are no longer used because we learned that they contributed to stigma and discouraged people from seeking help. That same shift, luckily, is happening in addiction treatment. Changing our language doesn't excuse harmful behavior, nor does it remove personal responsibility. It simply acknowledges that people deserve dignity while seeking treatment for a medical condition. So what can we do? Fortunately, it's very simple. Instead of saying addict, say a person with a substance use disorder. Instead of using terms like clean or dirty to discuss a urinalysis, indicating whether that person is clean because they didn't use drugs or they're dirty because they did use drugs, we can simply say the test was positive or the test was negative. Instead of defining someone by the worst chapter in their life, recognize them as a whole person. These changes don't cost anything. They don't require special training. They simply require us to think a little bit more about the words that we choose. So today we've discussed how language shapes our perceptions, how stigma creates barriers to recovery, and how person-first language can help reduce that stigma. Changing a few words may seem like a small thing, but small changes often have a big impact. The words we choose influence how people are viewed, how they're treated, and again, sometimes how they see themselves. So the next time you hear someone described as an addict, I hope you'll pause for just a moment and think about the person behind that label. No one wants to be defined by the worst chapter of their life. And recovery is about hope, growth, and second chances. The language we use should reflect that. Thank you.